We really should have waiting parents, not waiting children. Over 100,000 children are available for adoption through the U.S. foster care system, and 27% don't have anyone, like a relative or foster parent, in the process of adopting them. 60% are between the ages of 5 and 17, and 2/3 are part of sibling groups of 2 to 8 children. Hey listener, my name is Marcy Bursack. My husband and I chose adoption as our plan A. After blogging about our journey adopting a sibling pair, I began mentoring families right in my own living room. That passion grew into the Forgotten Adoption Option, a nonprofit I now lead as a volunteer while working full-time in the tech industry. From my blog, 3 books, app, and classroom lesson to now a 45-minute course called Foster Care Adoption Simplified, which you can find at ForgottenAdoptionOption.com, I've created practical, heartfelt resources to help families navigate the foster care adoption process. As you listen to this episode, I encourage you to ask yourself, who in my circle needs to hear this? It's often people in what we call helper professions, people like therapists, nurses, doctors, police officers, firefighters, social workers, and teachers like my husband. These are the people who tend to step forward to adopt children from foster care. But this work isn't only about becoming an adoptive family, it's also about becoming an advocate and ally. Every waiting child deserves not just a forever family, but a community of people who champion their future. Whatever led you to this podcast, I am thrilled that you are here. My mission is simple, to help every waiting child be with their forever family. And that's exactly why I host this podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, we will hear how a social worker adopted a teen in her caseload. About a year ago, you might recall the episode How a Waiting Child Found His Forever Family. That interview was with a young man named Davion Going. He was the teen boy who stood before a church in Florida in 2013 and asked a family to adopt him. His action made national news and inspired over 10,000 families to explore adoption through foster care. But you might have been left wondering, Marcy, I want to know his adoptive mom's side of the story. Well, you're in for a treat. Hey, Connie.
Hi.
I love being able to do episodes in person. I'm in Sarasota. We just had the world premiere of the Davion Effect last night. And so Connie, I want to introduce you all to her. She spent over 35 years working in the child welfare system, and she's the adoptive parent, not only of Davion, but also another young man named Taylor. And the boys became good friends and refer to themselves as brothers when they were living in the same group home. Back in 2013, Davion was part of the caseload for Connie. So Connie was a social worker, and the whole story is covered in the documentary called The Davion Effect. So check it out on davioneffect.com. But let's hear Connie's story. So Connie, how long had you been Davion's social worker at the point in time when he went in front of the church and asked for an adoptive family? And what do you remember about this young man at the time?
Oh, absolutely. I actually was over the recruitment efforts, and Davion became personal. I met him when he was 7, and we did, I started the Heart Gallery at that time, and we did his portraits.
Some states have these heart galleries. So
Yes.
This is like an online thing. I think Matthew Straub actually was also
Yes.
a prior podcast guest. So these are like ways for people to see profiles of children in care. So podcast
Yes.
listeners, you see some of these photos in the teasers that I put out the day before we drop episodes. Just connecting the dots. Connie's very connected to the Heart Gallery as well.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes them real. It gives them a face. And so I'd known him since he was 7. We had a lot of events. We would do social things. So I always knew who Davion was. And I always could not figure out why he was not adopted and what was his story. And so I really had an investment in finding him a family. And so when he went before the church, I actually, because he knew my son Taylor through the foster care system, they were in a treatment program together, became brothers. I decided to ask my bosses, could he come to my house? Could we acclimate him into my home on the weekends so that he could have that normal family life? Because being in a program is very structured. You don't have freedom. And adjusting to a family is hard. And I wanted Davion, when he found his family, to be able to just embrace it and not struggle with what happens in this program versus what happens in a home.
Because they're not the same thing. Like
They're totally
realities
different.
are different, kind of institutionalized when you're in this like formal
Very
setting.
institutionalized and very rigid. And I just felt that this would be key for him. And so we were doing that. We started visiting, then we had him overnight, then he was there for the weekends. And so we became closer as a family. My whole family embraced him. And of course, him and Taylor were just always into everything. It was fun to watch them, and because they have a history that nobody else has, and they could share that, and it's a bond that nobody else has.
They've gone through something
Absolutely
together. So you met Davion at age 7. How old is he when he goes in front of the church?
15.
Okay, so that's 8 years of time. So you had been his social worker this whole time. You were the consistent social worker.
He actually had a caseworker, so things were kind of divided up, and I was over the program. Somewhere in the media, I get called his caseworker. I think it's too hard to kind of explain to the public, oh, there's this person and that person.
Sure.
So as far as, I oversaw the direction of his case.
Oh, okay.
Was I responsible for his everyday living, all those needs that a caseworker has to do? No. But I was the one who told her what to do.
Okay.
Or told her.
So you weren't doing the visits maybe with him, but you were aware.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was always aware. There were always children. I loved all the children that we worked with, but there were some that stood out that I just had. It's easy to love. Mm-hmm. It's easy to love, even if they're not your children.
But at the time, you also had biological children. So Davion's 15. How old were your two at the time?
Charlie, at that time was 15. And my other child, Sydney, was out of the home in college, so about 20.
And then Taylor was also with you at that time.
And yes, Taylor was like 12. Yep, 12
your hands full. Wow. And then how long, when did your social worker career start?
Oh, I'm an anomaly. So it's very, very interesting. I went ahead and never thought of being in social work or in human services, and I went to school for music.
You played the flute, right?
I played as a flutist.
That's something I did in like middle school and then gave it up. You went on with it.
That's really funny because I like you and you're a flute player. It
I
always works out that way. You're such a flute player. Yeah.
But did you play the piccolo?
Oh, yes, yes.
I got to conduct when my middle school band teacher was gone. She taught me how to use the little thing you hold.
I love it.
That's so funny.
Also the reporter for this story was a flute player, Lane.
I didn't know that.
So
we could have our own little trio.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so funny.
But I went to college for music performance. And I ended up in Florida after I was in New York for a while, went to school up there, then came down here and really, really found it hard to make a living after I graduated. And through school, I worked in the field. I worked in mental health. I worked with clients that were deinstitutionalized. I would take them to activities on a bus.
Are you like early 20s at this point or
mid-20s? Oh yeah, I'm 19. I'm 19.
Wow.
19 and 20.
Okay.
And always a bit of an overachiever. And but I needed a job, and I'd either work at the
like
mall or get a job. And once you have your AA, you're moving forward, you can get different jobs. And I was good at this.
Your AA being like your associate's degree?
Yes.
Okay, in arts. Okay.
And as I'm attaining that, I needed jobs. And so working like shift work at group homes, the psychiatric unit, and I found it fascinating. I found, learning how people ended up where they were, their stories, those things just stories were fascinating to me. When I graduated, I taught full-time music, worked with the school system, taught privately, performed, subbed with the orchestra. And then I had a car accident and I ended up with reconstructive surgery on my jaws, and that ended that career very suddenly. And I thought, well, I need a job. As always, everyone needs a job.
I mean, you needed that to blow.
Yes, and to be that level of, because I was doing some recording. I mean, I had reached the point that I always wanted to, like the top in my world.
Any other instrument, if you just would have played the drums.
Yeah,
like maybe you would have
about it.
Yeah.
And so, I just really I'm a kind of a coper and went to the next phase. The state was hiring in Florida back then. It was HRS.
Which stood for like human
health and I don't know.
I'll
tell you what the code name for it. They used to call it the Human Wrecking Service. That would have been in the late 80s.
Wow.
And I went ahead and moved into a great position. I got grandfathered in by somebody who saw the ability for me to do the job. And they were able to look at all my education, my classes, my hands-on experience, and grandfather me in as a caseworker. Which is crazy.
You had the heart of it. I mean,
yes.
I think our listeners are like, there's something like the palette of it. So, okay. So if we Google Davion and we look at his story being adopted, we see you in a lot of the pictures because you're in that, and especially in the documentary and the Davion Effect, you're in the scene where he's going into the church.
Yes.
So where on earth did this idea of like, let's arrive, you're going to wear a suit, go talk?
It was a family meeting, dinner, whatever, movie. We were all talking. And so I had my I had my son Charlie, I had Taylor. We were all sitting there talking, and I said, David, because we talked about being a family, and I always tell, and Davion says this in the documentary. He says, I told him that when he met his real family, his forever family, he would take off the facade of who he had to pretend to be in the system, because in the system, everything is measured. I must be good at this level. It's very behavioral. And then I get this reward. And then I get this reward. But you shouldn't have to work to be a family. You should be able to be who you are. And what he saw in our home is that Taylor was very much who he was. And Taylor would have some challenges. He would get in my face. He would be processing something and yelling, and I would stay calm. And we're still together. We're family. We worked through it. And I said, Davion, that will happen for you when you find your family. And then I said, and Taylor said, what would you do for a family? And the conversation led to, well, I said, church. And Taylor says he brought it up, but somehow it came up into that conversation. And we created where I was going to take him. I got permission. Got the caseworker buy-in, the agency, all those things, and we took him to church.
I mean, whose church is this, though? Because
I wanted it in the Black community. I wanted it in the Black community. Prince knew about it. We call Richard Prince. And
it's his mentor.
Mm-hmm. First there were a couple other churches that we went to before we ended up in the church with the story. There were 2 other churches we went to.
That he went in front of.
Yeah.
He has 3 churches.
Mm-hmm. Did 3 churches.
Whoa.
And then I had been meeting with my friend Lane. And she's with the Safety
journalist.
Times.
Yeah.
And she writes beautiful, beautiful Pulitzer. She's amazing.
Award-winning.
And
I get she plays so the flute, so there's
and she plays the flute. And so she said, I'd like to make that part of his story. I think that would be really a good part. And I had a friend, April, who was involved in all of that. She was our communications director at the time. And we went ahead and we set it up, having no idea. But you know what? To me, safe, participated exposure for children who take charge of their story and their desires for adoption are part of what we need to enforce more and create more and give them opportunities for that. And he was brave enough to do it. And that day, it was Richard's church, and it was their homecoming day, so it was packed. And I had no idea what he was going to say, and he just went up and did it, because Davion has always spoken from his heart. Doesn't write anything down, doesn't prepare, just talks from the heart. And so that's what he did. And Lane.
And Taylor credits himself with the idea.
Oh, always. You'll hear him.
So
he said, that was my idea, but it was a family conversation. And it could have been, but it was all together that, Davion, what would you do for a family?
It's like a solution, but also a dare. Because that's so brave.
Well, Taylor had kind of done the same thing in his story. It's a fascinating story.
Oh.
And it was when he finally told the system, no, I'm going to Miss Connie's. And he had been in 47 placements by the age of 12. He had been adopted and returned, and they kept his sisters. It was a very painful time in foster care. And him and Davion really share a lot of the same pain and losses. And so their bond is important.
And I want to dive more into the story, but I want to rewind a little bit, because I know some of our listeners are teachers, social workers, folks like me that kind of run a home that is structured. And I want to touch on this part about, being who you are and just kind of speaking into that, because there's a saying within adoption and in foster care, especially, that, love is important, but structure is so helpful to have some sort of routine. But can you kind of help our listeners understand, if you're the kind of parent, maybe you're thinking about adopting through foster care, if you like routine and schedule, this is still a space for you, but I just kind of want to clarify.
It is a space for you. So, and I love that you're doing that, because children need structure. Structure means safety. And we need to provide that for them from the time they're little. And they need safety with love, safety with consistency with love. And you keep adding it in. And if you don't feel safe, you can't grow in any way, physically, mentally, emotionally. But what happens to our teens in care, they've been through some of that, and they've never had safety. Not true safety.
What is true safety?
True safety is that all your needs are safely met. You don't have to worry about being fed or clothed or what's happening to you, or nobody can remove you. And it's a process that many of our teens never have. And as adults, they don't have. because foster care is a wonderful thing in the sense of, with good people and all these, tools that they can have, you can do this successfully. But the true piece of adoption is unconditional. And when I say you step into adoption, you step into the fear, there are so many unknowns, but there is no going back. And you have to really reach that place. The system doesn't always have the time to help you reach that place, but we owe it to these children. Now, many of you may hear, like I say, Taylor was returned, what a horrible family. If you analyze that, there were issues, and in every case there will be. So it's not like, don't say you would never do that, but we can always do better. And I think that the structure piece, when you get to group homes and you get to residential programs, is more you learn to be what is expected of you, like the military, okay? But eventually you leave the military, and then you have to figure out who you are. A home to me is one that has the expectations of respect. We have 2 rules in my house: respect and have a purpose. Respect covers most everything. Having a purpose is school or work, your passion. What are you going to do? Because these kids have had a lot of rules, a lot of things, and they think if they fall off that ledge, you're done, you're leaving. Because at 47 placements, at 30-something placements,
every time it's been that way.
Every time you raise your voice, you have to leave. If Taylor had gotten in my face the way that he did in growing together as a family, he would be Baker acted, and then he would be gone.
Okay, so let's talk about Banker Act, because I know for some this is like a very, very new term, and this is where, like, because we in the film, I noticed in the kitchen you have these like shutter looking doors, and there's a part missing.
Yes.
And we were just talking about doors and walls before we kind of went into record mode. And I wonder if you can kind of help us understand, like, what are these behaviors, and they're normal, and what could we do instead of the Banker Act is actually getting removal of children, right?
Right, because they're a danger to themselves or others. A lot of things can be fit in there, and sometimes children need regulation and they need medication adjustments, and that's the appropriate use of a Baker Act.
Sure.
But in foster care, unfortunately, they don't always come back to the home that they were Baker acted out of. And the
family just feels like
it's beyond their skills. Well, they're scared. Of course, it's scary. There are all different types of children for adoption. So out of the over 120,000 right now, we have moderate children with moderate behaviors, lost behaviors. We know that trauma is loss, creates behaviors. And we just remember that nothing is ever purposeful. Like, I did this on purpose, usually. And I think that in remembering that, children come sometimes with, how do you express anger if you can't verbalize it?
Or if every time you got removed because you never learned that love on the other side and that acceptance of expressing it.
And I love you. Think about getting married to your spouse. I love you no matter what. I love you whether you make a poor choice or your behaviors aren't the best to stay. And in adoption, it isn't always like that, not in foster care. And so what I mean by taking off that facade is that what I saw with Davion, especially being in that group home, there was level 1, there was level 2, there was level 3. At level 3, you got more, there's all these, and that works for some children. But to really head into an adoptive home, he couldn't have kept that up the rest of his life. Eventually, I was going to see Davion, and eventually I was going to see Taylor. So I had to know what was the worst. For me, both my boys were what I personally call a high-end child, meaning that the behaviors could be extreme. They could be physical. They could be running away. They could be hitting. They could be breaking things. But I believed in my heart these were my boys. I'd been told that in my prayers. And trust me, I argued in my prayers, like, what do you think? And I have enough happening in my life. But I knew I was where I was supposed to be, and I knew there was no going back for me.
It's not fun to argue. I did that so often. I'm like, what?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah. And so there's a lot that happens, but there's pieces that you're in as, with the child welfare system, and then really getting involved as a formalized legal family. So yes. Davion speaks in front of the church, the third church. No one steps forward. And then this news article is written thanks to Lane.
Yes.
And it takes off, and across the nation, people are aware of Davion, and all sorts of things happen, and lots of details that folks can watch the movie and catch his episode. But he moves to Ohio.
Yes, he goes to Ohio.
What happens with your role with his case at that time?
Well, I was pulled off his case. Okay, so I cared about the child.
Mm-hmm.
We were privatized in Florida. Unfortunately, the agency we're with, I felt, was more focused on the publicity for themselves and the funding opportunities that came with that. And I care about Davion. I mean, I've cared about him for this long. I've fought for him to have what he has and didn't get a lot of support from the system that we're in. So I'm focused on child. I had to fight to do the interview on The View. They were going to send him up to New York with someone from management. And I said, absolutely not. So Richard, Prince, and I went. And I knew at that time I would go from being probably one of the top employees to being on the bottom of the list.
Wow. As
funders were coming in, I was watching them court them and kind of do what I call a dog and pony show with Davion. I was pulled off everything and put back into, there's a lot of other children, go help them.
You knew it. Wow.
And so I knew the writing on the wall until I left the beginning of January. They were looking for any reason. But you know, I aware. You're aware that he's in Ohio, and you're aware. Of they were told not to talk to me. What's really interesting, and it's in one of Lane's stories, midway through when he went, is that I actually was taking Taylor to the roller skating rink. I knew through the grapevine because I'm over the program. You gotta understand. So I'm hearing.
You're just so connected.
I know he's got a family, right?
Yeah,
it's a small office, but it was the craziest thing. We're at the roller skating rink the same time this family has him.
So they're
the boys see each other.
One of these visits. So I know, like, just to bring our audiences into this. So typically, when you're licensed as the adoptive family, you are matched or some version of this. Maybe there's an interview called a staffing. There's all these steps. Then, in order for this child to move in with you, you're supposed to kind of get familiar with them. Right. So this is one of those events where they're going out together, coming in town to visit with him.
Right.
Okay.
And just give them the roller skating rink.
Got it.
And we just happened to be there. And so Taylor and him see each other because when they took me away, they took Taylor away.
And he's not supposed to talk to him.
Right.
Oh boy.
And so they hug each other, blah, 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 blah. It's all great. And I kind of like leave Taylor and say, and she sees me and I see her. But little did I know, because during the placement, she reached out to me. And
the placement would mean that Davion has moved in with her. Okay.
Right. And I'm all about post-adoption support. And she says she was told that, not to talk to me, that I would be put it in the media and do things. Like, it was a whole story.
You kind of
she said, I'm going to test you. I'm going to tell you we're getting baptized today. And she sent me a picture. And so, of course, I didn't tell anybody. And I looked, and I was so grateful to hear anything because ultimately I wanted Davion to have a family.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that went on, and then things began to go downhill. And she called me a couple more times.
And just to give audience perspective here, so Davion legally has to live in their home for 6 months.
He's in an adoptive placement in Ohio
before they can go to court and finalize it.
Right.
So while he's there, there's still this like gray area of anyone can pull out. There's not like there's no promise, but the intention was this would
be move forward.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it was nice to know that he was doing okay for a while. When they began to struggle, we talked about some of his behaviors and ideas that they could try. And they were trying. Sometimes it's too much.
You became a mentor.
I love that. I mean, I think they needed that. And not all adoption programs post-placement have a model to where you get another adoptive family to walk with you hand in hand. And so they were very brave, I think, to reach out, but also probably pretty desperate that they needed that. And
but you had this familiar edge.
I could tell them, I'm dealing with Taylor. I'm surviving Taylor, and we're working on our relationship.
And Davion had already come over at this point. He was already visiting you, so you just had so much familiarity as like this kind of aunt figure, or just
and I wanted to be the aunt. That would have been really good. And I thought, I'm going to get to see him as he grows up, and he's going to be in Ohio, and he's going to be with this family. Yeah. And then the call came on a Sunday that they were sending him back. Before any other call came, she called me.
So they just said, we're done, and we just can't. And that happens. I think we use the term disruption, right? Like, and it sounds so clinical, but my heart goes to, but there's this young man.
Yes.
And it's not this little person that maybe would be unaware. And even that's a whole other story, but you have this teenage boy who has already gone before 3 churches, wants nothing more
And it's in the media.
Right. Everyone's watching.
Media. Like his name, it was just everywhere.
Yeah.
And, I didn't hear for a while after that, but the media about maybe 11 days after that broke the story. And, they had a lot of personal details I feel they shouldn't have. But, in
front of the public.
Like I turn on the evening news and David Muir is saying, foster child gets returned. Aww. And they were everywhere.
Everyone's just like, Davion, like we want to just protect you and shield you. And I'm just thinking, as a friend and as a mom, you're just like, this isn't fair. Like everyone's watching, and so he's distraught. He's disappointed. All these things are happening, and then a few days later, you get a phone call.
No.
Okay.
It took him a while to get a phone.
Oh.
I didn't hear anything from him for a while. And I asked Richard, have you heard anything? And it took him a while to get in touch with us. And I remember this very well because my dad was in the hospital. Now, meanwhile, I had already talked to my kids, and they're like, what are you going to do? And I said, well, we love him. If I can't promise anything, I'm not going to pursue it. But if,
opportunity,
I would be open. I would be open because it had already been on my heart so much. And, but I wasn't going to pursue it because I felt and I didn't think the system would support me.
And I'm thinking as like an outside person that doesn't have any contact in this realm, I'm thinking I could watch the news and think, oh, I feel so sad and sorry. But you're actually seeing the news as sort of your update source. It's
yes,
like
that was my update source.
And so it's giving you opportunity to go through some thinking and evaluating that the rest of us aren't even thinking about because we're not close enough. So this is really interesting, Connie.
The call comes. My dad is in one room. I look at it, and it's Davion's number. And I excuse myself.
But he had to get the phone. So how does he have the same number?
He didn't. He said he got my number from Richard, but his number was the same.
Okay.
His number was the same. And I pick it up, and he's like, Miss Connie. And I remember we chit-chatted a little bit, and then he said, Miss Connie, would you adopt me again? Would you adopt me now? That's what he said, now. Aww. I was like 100% yes, Davion.
Had he ever asked before?
No.
He just was...
Well, he alluded to it before.
Okay.
And then we had the conversation that, I believe for this reason, all the reasons.
Yeah, you can't, it's hard when you're so connected to all of these different children.
I love you, but I feel you need more than I can give you. Aww. And, being a single mom, I felt he needed, just more than I had. And I had a lot of chaos in my home. So I said to him, but this is how we need to do this. I said, I knew I could not fail in my pursuit. If we made this plan, I said, first of all, let's keep it just between you and I and Richard right now. I said, I'm going to hire an attorney. I am going to do a private home study, and then we can present it in court.
Because you knew enough about what's going on. Because I want our listeners to hear this too.
I was worried.
Of all these things happening.
I was worried about we love to think that systems are fair and that life should be fair. But honestly, personal opinions, things like that in that field, in systems, people judge. People make decisions about families that maybe aren't always fair. And for me, I felt they would not be thrilled with me adopting him at all.
So you were kind of making a strategy about.
And so we came up, and Davion was part of that strategy. And I did those things. And when he went to court, they said, and what are you going to do now? The judge said, what are you going to do now, Mr. Mr. Only? Mm-hmm. And he said, Miss Connie's adopting me. And there was this dead silence. And then they had a big meeting, and there was he stood firm. And he chose to be with me. And that was a big part of this. He wanted to be with me. And we didn't fail. And then he took even more charge of his story. He was in charge of his life. And I think that changes everything.
Mm-hmm. When you're owning it. So as an adoptive parent, because we've had other podcast guests that have been the adoptive parent of a teen that's approached them. And one thing I want to maybe dive a little bit more in is, I don't know how long of time that was between when you're aware of what's going on and even the first time you kind of alluded at it. You had time to think. So this wasn't like, oh, I'm doing this, I've only thought about it for 5 minutes. Like, you had significantly invested your heart in this, your mind in this. Can you give parents that are like, if this ever happened to me, or this is kind of how I needed to think and sit with that, can you give us a peek into how long that took and all the things that went through your mind?
Well, when he was visiting us, I mean, and we were looking for families, and I believe we talked before. It was around the time we talked about churches. I told him why I felt he needed to look in his own community, and that I felt that culturally, we had this long discussion. Would he have been happy just staying with us? And I said, I remember saying to him, honey, you don't want my crazy. Because my crazy was a lot at that time. Taylor was doing much better, but it was a long way to go for our whole family to gel together. And I'm only one person. I didn't feel I had the money. I didn't feel it would be fair to him that he needed more. And of course, he respected that. And, but he knew I always loved him. And I think that that's kind of part of this. It takes more than love, but kids need to know you love them, even if you can't adopt them.
But you had in your own self kind of gone back and forth.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Well, I had never pursued him. And the thing was, I just knew in my prayers, I knew that it was great to love him, but I had a full plate. And, between logic and prayers, he was moving in a different direction. When he came back, I had one thought, what's going to happen and would I? And then I had a conversation with my kids. Of course, they were like, yes, of course.
But you did say no for a period. I want to just give our listeners
said
an
no.
exhale to that, because it is okay to think about this and feel like these are all the reasons, right? Maybe not right now, or maybe not me. It is okay,
absolutely.
But it's also so healthy to explore, like you did. What if I did? Or what if maybe later? And it just kind of comes back full circle. And so I'm curious because, so Davion, this 6-month legal window, he's got to live with his family in Ohio. So with the word is disruption, but with him not completing that and getting kind of to that finish line of adoption, what was that 6 months living together like? Because I imagine if it was me as Davion, I would be on pins and needles, so nervous that even though I know Connie, I love Connie, I've got this guy Taylor with me, but there's this you're holding your breath waiting.
Well, he came in very much wanting to take care of me. He knew that Taylor was struggling with me. We had a lot of challenges, and he was not going to be like that. Well, the challenge is when he became Davion, then he was who he was, and he had things he needed to process. He had anger he needed to process. So giving him a safe space, not forcing him to fit a mold. School was probably the biggest challenge. I took him to the school. It's predominantly in the Black community where all my other kids go. I live in a very diverse neighborhood, and he lasted 10 days.
Why?
He said, I don't think people like me. I'm not comfortable. And he was biting his nails off. He had no nails, and he was so anxious. So I thought for sure he would go because Taylor was there and Charlie was there in different programs, and absolutely not. So then he came home, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And his safe place is in front of a video game in his room. And I needed to not take things away. I needed to let him saturate in it.
Because there are other vices you could pick that would be so much more worse, right?
And it's always been his place. And so that's what I let him do for a little bit. And then I did homebound with him, which is where you stay at home. This system worked with me. And he did no work. And he laid in bed all day. And but just adjusting, you think about it. When we adopt children, we think school, 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 school. I'm not a good parent if my child doesn't graduate. I'm not a good parent if they don't do well. But the problem is his brain was in fight or flight from all the years in foster care and now this new move.
It was just normal.
He had been in 5 schools the year.
In this 12-month period.
Yes.
Woo.
And I was not going to force him. And so we tried homebound, it did not work. And I was kind of at a loss because what are the 2 rules in my house? Respect for yourself and others, keep working on it, and have a purpose. Now, he was willing to get a job. Okay, so he started working a job. We pushed that way. And then I found micro school, which is a regular diploma, but it's geared for kids I'd say 14 through 21. And they do in school, it's not at home, it's half a day. He has to go and he gets hands-on instruction. They have special classes. And this is fantastic.
Such a cool way to design the program.
Absolutely. And they continued to give him a lot of flexibility.
Which is what he needed.
But I can tell you, and he will laugh at this. We talked about it last night. I would go to pick him up some days and he wouldn't go. because I'd go to work early to get the work done. Then I'd come home to pick him up and drive him. And one couple times he would like do silly things, like he'd maybe be in his pajamas or shirt off, and he'd jump on the hood of my car and hold on. Like, he's silly.
Mm-hmm.
But I am completely frustrated because I'm dealing with that parent thing about school. Like, I must have a kid that goes to school, and here's my kid on the hood of my car. No one would believe this. What are you doing? and he would go inside. But again, his brain was in fight or flight. He was struggling. He had a counselor, but the counselor, he'd been counseled out. Let's put it that way. The best counseling for Davion was going to come with us and letting him settle in. Medication. My boys, he was heading to 18. They wanted off their medications. And then there were behaviors. There were challenging behaviors that were every day. I call myself the whack-a-mole, because as a single mom, before I went to bed, I had to hit all the you know how you go to like the Chuck E. Cheese and the little moles pop up?
Unpredictable.
Boom, 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 boom. Every day was like that. I was actually living in my own post-traumatic stress. Secondary.
Wow.
Didn't even realize that. I'm surviving work and this and that. I think what I saw in the video as we were starting to do that later was even my body in those years reflected what I was feeling, and my health reflected it. But I would do it again. I would totally do it again.
Parenting.
But this is what it's not all children are this challenging. But I can say, I don't think I'm a super mom. I think I'm a committed mom. I think I'm creative parenting, and I'm always wanting to build my toolbox. Well, I go to bed at night and say, that didn't work. Let me try this. So I think that through that time period, we just got through it. We were glad to get to the finalization, and we knew there'd be media and kind of controlling that. We took a cruise right after it with me and the boys and my kids. It was becoming a family. Everything was about becoming a family. Davion, interesting point. Davion and I have our birthdays on the same day.
Aw, that's interesting.
Isn't that just beyond like, ooh?
Yeah.
Yep, February 12th.
Can't have a birthday without thinking about him.
Oh no, we're in it together. We go get
Honey.
pedicures usually if we're in town together.
Wow. So it sounds like the focus, it's great. It sounds like the focus of those 6 months, you weren't even thinking about, is this going to work or not? You were just like, it is going to work, and we're going to figure out how.
Right. It wasn't a test drive.
Yeah.
And I tell people that when they're there, it's not a test drive. You don't get to test drive. You have to do that work before. And even then, I didn't realize in adoption, even though I ran post-adoptive support groups for many years, this was my passion. Until I rode the horse, I didn't know what it felt like. And what it felt like to me was being alone. I felt very, very isolated. And I couldn't go to my office where I worked in this field and did adoptions, because who would understand? And I had, I remember my boss found out an incident about Taylor through somebody else. Taylor told my friend who told my boss, and my boss said to me, I don't think you should do this adoption. That is not what you're supposed to hear. You're supposed to say, what can I do to help? That must be hard. What do you need?
Which happens often, right? I mean, I can't tell you the number of families I hear from that say, I told my immediate family and their grandma was on board, but my own parents said, what are you doing? That's scary. And so it's like, oh no. And to your point, like there's fear in there.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of education in there. And that's not what we need to hear on the other side. And they feel like they're protecting us. They
love you. Yeah. They don't want you to hurt. And that's been, I've been through it with my parents. Of course what I love about my parents is they are unconditional. And I think that's where unconditional is such an important word, because they may not like what you're doing, but they will, if they love you enough to learn why and what your purpose is, then they will. And through time, now I can look back and see, and my mom and I talk about it. And, sometimes it's you shoulda or you woulda. And I'm like, but I don't think like that. I am 100% comfortable with my choices in every single piece of this journey. And because, some people will say that adoptive parents save children, and I stop them and I say, well, let me explain something. I believe my children saved me. Where was my life going? I was single. I was divorced. I had 2 girls. I had every other weekend. I had a motorcycle. I mean, I was like having some fun. And I just knew this was something I had to do. For me, that's how it worked. And when I stepped into it, I lost friends. I lost family members. There was loss involved.
Really just relationships that
that don't relate to what you're doing.
Yeah.
I hear from people all the time that we talk about post-adoption, that their church members embraced them before but didn't embrace them after because of the behaviors of the children.
It gets really complicated.
And so you build your own. And this is what I did. I started another support group. I did a closed online group and really bonded and did weekly Zoom calls with whoever wanted to join, just because we needed to share. But what it gave me as a social worker was an insight that no matter how, I thought I was a pretty good adoption person, but once I lived it, oh, wow, I really got, when I get the call, and seeing that this is what happened, my judgment.
It made you better at your job, it sounds like.
Totally better. And there's a purpose there. And so I say to people, learn about what adoptive families step into and go through, and listen to them, because they're not, nobody adopts a child to have that not work. But we as a system, what it also showed me is what is a system we can do better, things we can create for families. And I think you don't know what you don't know. And so they deserve all the knowledge, as do the caseworkers, because here's a little caseworker out of college, whereas many years ago, adoption workers used to be the end of the line. Like, you had to know everything to do adoptions. Now, sometimes they're beginning of the line. How does that worker know the intricacies that go into a home study? There's just so many skills that go into the whole adoption.
So a social worker used to have a lot more experience before working in the adoption space.
You should. And I think you should start with adoptions that fail and work backwards.
Connie, to be continued. Okay, so usually episodes end with talk to this person. I actually have 3 different listeners I would love to invite you to speak into. And the first one I'd love to have you speak into, because this happens, okay? It's the listener that says, there's this young woman I know through church. There's this young man that I know because I'm his basketball coach. There's these siblings that I know because I'm their teacher. Connie, they feel torn, right? They like, I know that I know this child. I don't know if I can be their parent, but man, and they're coming to me, or the social worker saying, will you please consider this? What can you impart to them on how you kind of discerned or decided that would help them decide what they want to do?
Well, I think a consultation with somebody who really can help you figure out where you're at, can look at where your life has been, where it's at, and where you want it to go for the next so many years.
Who's that person? How do I find it?
It could be me. I get calls like that a lot. It could be me. But I know there's other me. There's others, people like that can do that. I think it's necessarily not somebody in the system.
How would I find that person? If I'm that coach,
I would join every adoption thing that I could online. I'd step away from the ones that are angry. Well, I say I like listening to adoptee groups, and I want to embrace their anger and validate it. But I feel like where you need to be is with other parents who've adopted,
and how they decided, and how they and
ask those questions. But also, do you know your own? Because the first thing, if you sit down with me, I want to know what your traumas are and which ones are resolved and which ones aren't. And I want to say, just so you know, that one may resurface again. Because we all know that trauma doesn't go away. It resurfaces. And children will bring out your traumas. Children with trauma, it's like in a relationship. And you don't always see it because you're so busy living. And so to really kind of just talk about the reality is, why, the whys, and help them do some self-reflection. And that can be through books too, but I think the conversations, I think education, knowing everything that you know and knowing there are variables, and then just between the education and the conversations, the group discussions, I think that is where listening to podcasts like this spark that interest and just dig deep, because we all want to help. Some of us want to help as a board member. Some of us want to help. Where do you step over that line? For me, and I've had many conversations with licensed social workers that, well, we could never do that. We could never adopt. If you separate ethically with your agency everything that's going on, then you realize you might be the right source for that child. But, that's the first thing that I did. It
happens quite often.
Yes. Well, more than it used to. It used to be totally shunned. Like, we were not allowed to do it.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
But for me, I always just loved a little more. I don't know how. That's how I live life. It's easy. And I feel like the kids deserve that. But the other thing I think to remember is it's not going to be about you very often. You know, we need to make it about us in our own moments. But honestly, the adoption journey for your child should be about them.
And is it okay for me to take some time? Like, should
Should
I give myself, because I know some families have taken a summer, like, it's okay to know that you don't have an answer this week and that you're still thinking on it.
And it, you know, it always hurt me when I would see children go through these disruptions and not find their home. Make sure that you're 100% in. If there's any more than that, just be in and know yourself. It's not a logical decision too. Mm-hmm. People think, especially logical people, left brain thinkers, it's got to be da 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 da. Well, I'm going to tell you that right brain, that faith, whatever you believe in, you have to be whole with that in order to take this on. You know, very much so, because there will be a time where you lay on the floor and you may question what you've done. You'll shut the door and think, oh my God, how am I going to get through tonight and tomorrow? But it can be done. I think I'm one of the most unlikely people to go through this. Mm-hmm. And so I just, you know, it's my journey, and I would do it again. So that I definitely think mm-hmm. that for those type of situations, really find the experts that can talk you through it. And those are usually families who've adopted before. Because you can make an informed decision that way. So in a similar way, another huge segment, I saw a news article recently about the number of single parents that step up in this space. And I know many of them, whether it's single mom, single dad, you're doing this as a single mom with a teenager. I'm curious if there's anything you wish you would have known, or anything that you're like, this thing like really helped me, that you would share with single people that are thinking, I'd like to do this, but I'm a little unclear on how to do this. Well, the positives of being a single adopted parent are that you don't have to share your parenting gains or losses with anybody. You can make the rules. You are it. And so Mike, I didn't date through that time period.
By choice?
By choice.
Okay.
I got off the Harley, sold the Harley. And, you know, I changed my life. I did a turn because, number one, this is my chaos. These are my struggles. I did not allow anybody to come in and parent my children or tell me that I was, because who's going to understand what I'm doing anyway? And I have to tell you, I'm a pretty creative parent. And I did things like when Taylor was saying the F word nonstop for days, he would break down placements. I had 24 hours of the FU in every sentence I used. I used it with him in 24 hours in every sentence. Wow. And if we weren't live, I just demonstrated. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. It's about time to get up. It's blank. Your bus is here. Oh, your friends are here. Your friends are here. 24 hours. Taste of his own medicine. You know, I did things like give my son Taylor an entire box of any food he wanted that he slept with. He spray painted it, decorated, and put the most disgusting white junk food stuff in there. You know, when I didn't have the answers, I just used my creativity. Sure. And it worked. They were successful. Sometimes they weren't successful. You know, but I think that all those things I didn't have to share with anybody. Mm-hmm. The downside was I didn't have a partner. You know, I didn't have somebody help me monitor my health. After the boys were gone, I spent the first year of COVID, I had 4 surgeries on got my hips done. I was falling apart. Mm. And so self-care is very poor. So I didn't have a partner to help me with that. And of course, the other downside that my mom tells me is that I spent my 50s raising children. And you should have been finding that man to grow old with, you know. There's other decades. But, you know, I'm okay with that. And again, I just didn't think there wasn't a person that I was willing to share this chaos with. And my boys were oppositional and defiant. And so I don't recommend it. From my situation, I had to. Mm-hmm. My boys would have resented any other man in the house because they both vied. All of them were vying for man of the house. You're saying you don't recommend dating during that time? No. I don't recommend not dating for everybody. It's up to you. If you've got the energy left, God bless you. But there wasn't a lot of me left because it was full time. It was a conscious boundary. Yes, and I kept it through the whole time until they were gone. So you knew that would help. Okay, so speaking of your boys, mm-hmm.
I would love, as we close, for you to speak to the Davions across the country. There's more than 100,000 children who are waiting to be adopted. Many are teenagers in sibling groups. And I'm curious because, Connie, you have this unique perspective where you've been involved in child welfare. You've championed for children in your caseload, and yet you've then become family. What would you say to the 12-year-old, the 18-year-old, the 8-year-old, the siblings? What would you say to them?
I would say that you are not your trauma, and you are not a foster child. You are this incredible human being who deserves to have a connection, and a lifelong connection, to someone who loves you and will protect you forever. It is unconditional, and you deserve that. And I need you to feel that you deserve that, so that we can really, really tell the system what you want. You need to tell them what you deserve, which is that connection. And you can't control who your parents were or where you came from. You can't control the loss, but you can control who's in your life, and hold the system and the people accountable. Believe you're worthy of it, and manifest it and pray for it. Because I like to believe that when you look up at the stars and you are saying, I believe that I'm worthy of this, that I deserve this, I'm going to make this happen, no matter what, that there's a family out there thinking the same thing. And they're thinking, I can do this, I could do this, I will do this. And they're in that, and we have to get you connected. I just believe there is a family for every single child, not because you're, quote, adoptable, but because you are an amazing person the way that you are.
So, Connie, if I'm that young person in the system feeling bounced around and I don't have permanency, would you tell me to go ask someone that I love if they would adopt me?
I would ask you to, if there's someone that you have a connection to and you care about, I would say, ask them, talk to them, don't be afraid to form deeper relationships. Step out of being superficial. Do what you have to do to survive, and find the people that support you. Build your tribe, and then know that by you advocating for yourself, you can change part of the system for yourself and others. And I want more workers to listen to that. Not to say that child is a pain in my butt, that those are the children that need the most. And believe you're worthy, and have the hope and make it happen.
Championing all the children. Connie, this has been incredible. It's so nice to be able to spend time with you in person.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for letting us peek in. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for paving a path that's not easy and helping us all see how to do it too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. It truly matters that you listen today, because by tuning in, you're opening your heart to the stories of children in foster care, sparking empathy and starting to see how your unique role, whether as a friend, advocate, or even as a future adoptive parent, can bring hope and belonging to a child or sibling group that is waiting. I also want to personally invite you to reach out to me to ask anything that's on your heart. I promise no judgment. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and I mean it when I say you can ask anything. I know it can feel awkward to ask questions publicly, and that's why I carve out time during my lunch hour and evenings while my kids and husband are at martial arts to mentor others one-on-one. Your questions matter, your curiosity matters, and most importantly, the role you are playing in helping children in foster care matters. Together, we can bring hope and belonging. Until next time, take care and keep the conversation going.